Lord Gwyn trembled at the dark, clinging to his age of fire, and in dire fear of humans, and the Dark Lord who would one day be born amongst them. Lord Gwyn resisted the course of nature by sacrificing himself to link the fire and commanding his children to shepherd the humans. Gwyn has blurred your past to prevent the birth of the Dark Lord.
Lord Gwyn was once the near suzerain of the world who enslaved giants, subverted mankind, and slaughtered the archdragons, ushering in an age all for himself. Having found the Lord Soul of Light, Gwyn was the most powerful being of all and systematically constructed a civilization that would be a testament to his power. With time, however, Gwyn's grip over the world began to slip as the orchestrations he set up no longer served him, and the natural life cycle of fire began reaching its end. Such is the way of things, that darkness shall follow light's end, but Gwyn's vanity would not let dominion subside. Rather, he sought to subvert this flow, and his corrupting effect spawned the nigh-endless horror which controls the narrative of the expanded Dark Souls franchise. But so what? You know this story, right? It's not like massive chunks of it were lost in translation, and what the community has been working with since 2011 has been a suboptimal script. Is it? It is. But soon, it won't be. Hello everyone, and welcome to the Dark Souls lore breakdown. This video will serve to flesh out the landscape I'll be drawing on in my follow-up analysis video, but it's also a very special occasion. For this video, I've partnered up with Lokey, whom I did the Demon's Souls retranslation talk with, to get a clearer picture of what Dark Souls' story really is. Forget what you think you know. This is the lore properly translated, and you'll learn, as I did, that many of the narrative ambiguities which have permeated From Software's games since the days of Demon's Souls actually have their origin in localization, not intent. So, let's briefly talk about the Abyssal Archive. In my opinion, the most comprehensive Dark Souls lore project ever assembled, featuring in-depth analyses and detailed comparisons between the original Japanese script and the English one. It was put together by Lokey, and I couldn't be happier to promote it. Lokey has always been the most detailed lore hunter in the community, and the work put into the 2-volume project is nothing short of amazing. To fetch your copy, go to AbyssalArchive.com. For a better sense of the book's content, subscribe on the bottom of the campaign page to receive an email with sample chapters. There's also a pre-order campaign for a limited edition which will run until August 14th. If that excites you, act quickly. Support for the Abyssal Archive will help fund future projects like it, including an audiobook version to be narrated by VaatiVidya. Once more, check this project out at AbyssalArchive.com. Let's give a special thanks to our friend Lokey in the comments for including us in this project, and please consider supporting the book. With these formalities out of the way, let's explore the story of Gwyn. Before the Age of Fire, before the gods, there was the Age of Ancients, and the world was ruled by everlasting archdragons. According to director Hidetaka Miyazaki, the ancient dragons are half-living, half-elemental creatures who feel no pain and who predate the emergence of life in the world. In the context we get to know them in-game, dragons are unnatural. That part about them feeling no pain is taken literally, but it's a neglected function often chopped up to a development oversight. This unnaturalness of the archdragons is a reflection of changed context, not that they are wrong, for they belong to a different time. The world before the flame was stagnant. The archdragons lived in the foggy grey, without ambition or drive, without will as we would understand it, for what is there to will or want in a world without disparity? How could pain come to be in a world without pleasure? The world was idle and as uniform as the fog which shrouded it, and then there was fire. Fire changed everything. With it came light and darkness, disparities, opposites. And with fire came souls, some great, some lesser, again, disparity. The endless murk of the archdragons ended with the emergence of disparity, and it found champions to embody the new law of the world. 4 great souls came to be, the soul of life, and its opposite in the soul of death, the soul of darkness, and the soul of light. These souls were found by the Witch of Isolith, Nito, the first of the dead, Gwyn, Lord of Sunlight, and the furtive Pygmy, and all were captivated by fire, according to the Japanese opening cinematic. The Lord Souls translate literally to the souls of kings, and according to Quelana's dialogue, these 4 were the first kings in history, i.e., with dispersely powerful souls came dispersely powerful creatures, came hierarchy. Some rule, others follow. Before, the world was without such polarities, and soon the world would not know lack of disparity. The Japanese script refers to Gwyn as King of the Sun's Light, heavy emphasis on light, and his soul, the Light Soul, is described as being the most powerful. So, should what follows come as any surprise, Gwyn was to rule the next age without any credible opposition to his throne. In a way, this soul was made for a king. And whether what follows was Gwyn's innate latent desire or was something awoken within him by his Lord Soul is unclear, but it's no debate that he most eminently embodied the changing tide of the world. No one had a will as Gwyn did, and no one had a want as he did either. To the layman, the story goes that the lords found their souls and then made war with the archdragons. But there is an intermediary history here which the game expands on from time to time. Not long after the emergence of disparity, the idea of God comes to be. God in the Dark Souls universe basically denotes that the person is a member of Gwyn's inner circle and that they are loyal to him, or at least powerful enough that he must acknowledge them to maintain peace. So, while I'll be using the word God going forwards, keep in mind that it uniformly denotes nothing more than social status. The gods of the Dark Souls universe are bound to the same natural laws as the lesser beings. They are, after all, not the source of their power in the world, rather, they borrow it from some higher principle. The Lord Souls were found, not spawned by the innate strengths of those who have them. But this truth is not something the gods want the lesser beings addressing. Those who mock the divine power of the gods by systemizing their strength into something which normal people can obtain, see Big Ad Logan, are seen as pariah. To be a god means to be selected by the other gods. It's a country club, and like in every country club, there is a desire to deselect elements which will not conform to the powers that be. You can marry into it, but you must still submit to the orthodoxy within. Specifically, you must worship Gwyn. Gwyn is at the heart of his own civilization, which makes a certain amount of sense. He is his tribe's source of power, and he's the one who leads them to conquest. A cursory glance at Lordran will tell you how pivotal fire was to its people, and Anor Londo in particular. The image of a blossoming flower is repeated through it, and might be an overt reference to the first flame, something made explicit in Dark Souls 3's Sacred Bloom Shield. As fire does, flowers bloom and then fade and wither, abiding by a trajectory ordained to them by the governing laws of the world they exist in. And we can extrapolate that this symbolism is old in game. The Chloranthy ring aids stamina regeneration, which means it probably has its origin with Gwyn's tribe. They made the miracles which support physical health, and the relationship between physical health and physical energy is married in Fina's blessed ring, which increases both. And in Dark Souls 3's Ringed City, we see in this statue of Gwyn gifting the ring to a human that this ring is a symbol for Filianor, who maintains the virility of their home. The Chloranthy ring's face is a flower in bloom, and its item description reads, "This ancient ring, engraved with a large green flower, is of unknown origin. Hastens the regeneration of stamina." And the key part to take away here is that it is ancient. It is found on a corpse in the Great Hollow, which means it probably dates back to when people inhabited the lower world, and this imagery is also used in the coffin of the giants. So flower as fire is symbolism which predates even the construction of Anor Londo. In this world, fire is also seen as being synonymous with vibrancy, as it permeates everything and dominates nearly every domain wherein it plays a role. Smithing is the act of deconstructing and reconstructing material, and fire is the embodied form of transformation. Will gives the metal shape, but will is useless without fire. So fire guides the separated cultural developments in the world in a very real sense. On smithing, we know that special wooden hammers are needed to imbue weapons with lightning. Wood is non-conductive. And we also know that Ornstein had a lightning spear when the gods warred with the Archdragons. So smithing was a realized craft by the Anor Londo tribe before the Dragon War. In fact, it might be that the testing ground for much of this craft occurred when Gwyn subjugated the giants. In the times of the Chosen Undead, Gwyn is the only lord shown to have living giants serving him, acting as blacksmiths, knights, and gatekeepers. And in the Tomb of the Giants, we see that coffins housed both giants and gods, so they must have shared a banner for some time. In fact, we see in concept art that the Kiln of the First Flame was designed with giants in mind, and it's confidently the oldest ruin the game lets us visit, so the bond between gods and giants is certainly old. The kiln is also the earliest example we have of fire being enshrined. Gwyn's tribe is the seminal cultural force in the world, and it's likely not just owing to Gwyn's own power. He was still bound by the laws of the world he lived in, and so his ascendancy must have been a multi-pronged occurrence. It wasn't enough that the Anor Londo tribe had the most powerful living creature on their side, they also loved to experiment. Gwyn's lightning miracles are likely constructed by utilizing himself as a catalyst. Souls can be amalgamated at will in this universe, so this isn't far-fetched. The miracles are made manifest by the faith of the caster. Healing miracles have an obvious utility, and according to Ingward, healing curses was originally the art of the gods. Noteworthy here is that the only two entities in the entire game which can curse the player are the basilisks, who likely originate from Ass Lake, the lower world, which explains why the gods would have had a use for healing curses. They came from the lower world, after all. The other entity which can curse is Seath the Scaleless, and we'll talk more about him later. And it wasn't just miracles. The gods found it necessary to be protected in more conventional terms as well. The Silver Knights are an army, which is interesting because it's the only one we see in the opening cinematic. But not content to simply be protected in case things got heated, Gwyn also had an ambition to sate. And so, every function and form of his society was tuned to elevate him to the point that eventually the Anor Londo tribe became a religious order, centered on Gwyn, and this is likely when the god connotation emerged. After all, you better not use such big language until you can back it. And being gods meant that the tribe could begin acting with impunity. To facilitate the religious dominion, the gods created covenants, magic rituals wherein a party pledges servitude in exchange for gifts. These covenants facilitate a more personal relationship with the gods, and assumably it eased the gods' job of deciding who should be elevated. There's more subtlety to Gwyn's rule than you might think. For example, the partners admit that the gods are magnanimous and that they will tolerate those who don't join their covenants. As in, they aren't forcing their religion on people with arms. They're prodding everyone into it with social pressure. Why wouldn't you serve at the behest of the higher powers? Don't you want a higher status in life? Since the Covenants were originally made to facilitate worship of Gwyn's race, it's probable that Gwyn was the original Allfather. In the time period in which the game takes place, that station is filled by Lloyd, Gwyn's uncle, and this is a title which needs some elaboration because literally translated, it's something more akin to Chief God. And this is an important note to make because it's not that the Allfather is the maker of all things, it's that he leads the gods, and it's pretty certain that this title was originally Gwyn's. Even if the title itself didn't exist before Lloyd was given it, Gwyn was undoubtedly the one who led the gods. In fact, as we can see in the opening cinematic, Gwyn led everyone. The uniform harmony of the everlasting archdragons was eventually challenged on all fronts. Their immortality was replaced with the creation of new life, as well as death, as embodied by Izalith and Nito. The grey fog was replaced by a beaming light embodied by Gwyn, a light which would forever spawn in its absence its ultimate replacement in the dark. And, cementing that the Age of Ancients had ended, even among the dragons disparity arrived. Seath was born without the stone scales which granted the dragons their immortality. This disparity produced another in a longing for the gift his brethren took for granted, and so he abandoned them, and allied with the ambitious new lords of the Great Souls. The arrival of the new age demanded the eradication of the old, and so the archdragons, embodiments of the shapeless murk, were the targets. Archdragons, unmoved by want, would have no reason to instigate a conflict, so we can surmise that the Lords of the Souls struck the first blow. But first, a culture of knighthood was founded. In a most ancient fortress, we find the remnants of a dragon-slaying training ground. We find a lightning spear and see where knights would have deflected fire-breathing gargoyles in concept art. This fortress is named Sen's Old Castle in the Japanese text, but we know it better as Sen's Fortress. Culturally, dragon slaying also underwent a massive glamorization campaign. According to Knight Goth, dragon slaying is a knight's honor, and we see that the royal palace of Anor Londo prominently displays the heads of slain archdragons, actually cut from the Wyvern models, but these are supposed to be the dragons according to the Fangboar helm. And we also see it in the Hovel Knight, who sports a great hammer made from a dragon's tooth, as well as Goth's attire. Finally, the Silver Knights, whose attire is made to resemble angels, but with the wings on the helmets, the silver armor and the white cape. Given the religious connotations which dragon slaying was given, what could be a higher calling to a subject of God? And so, Gwyn went to war. He allied with the other lords. Whether he strong-armed them or whether this was an alliance of mutual motive is unclear, but it should be noted that even though he feared the Dark Soul, Gwyn included man in his war. And this united front of the lords was propped up predominantly by Gwyn, whose army served as their blades. The witches would burn the dragons' homes. Gwyn's lightning bolt stripped the dragons of their scales, and Nito released death to their exposed flesh. The often forgotten furtive pygmy and the expanded human race played a part as well, and by war's end, the archdragons were soundly defeated. Not destroyed, as the localization put it, but defeated. And these were intelligent creatures, and the lords knew that. They were allied with one of them, after all. The honor in the fight was a complete perception deal, and was completely one-sided. The archdragons were hunted down and destroyed to sate the drive of a power-hungry god king. Going forwards, remember that Gwyn annihilated the archdragons to promote his own interest as sovereign of the world, and no other reason. And don't be surprised when, going forwards, we discuss some of his other dark deeds. The 4 lords of the souls stood over the corpses of the archdragons and set about carving up the world, except one was given a lesser slice. After the dark soul had served its use, Gwyn began to corrupt man's relationship with the dark, leveraging the greatest strength he had on his side, time. Years of work had already solidified Gwyn as a big player in the world, and the eradication of the archdragons proved that he was above any other. His claims to godhood were now irrefutable, or so it seemed, because lingering in his mind was the knowledge that his age was temporary, just as the archdragons had been. For just as disparity would uproot uniform murk, darkness would replace light. One day, the fire shall fade. That is the natural law of the world. But Gwyn still had enough time to concoct his plan, and at this point, he was already well on his way. The alliance he had with man allowed him to gradually ease man into subordination. He allowed humans to spread out through the world, not because he wanted man to have a good life, or wanted the world to be inhabited. He did it because it would guarantee that humans would fragment. The gods had, by letting mankind spread out, thinned their number, which would firstly allow for their cultures to diverge and their shared destiny to become forgotten, and second, would make it easier for Gwyn to insert himself into their lives as an immortal figure. Without a singular identity, one of tribe or nationality, the only thing uniting man was the dark, but the gods would do away with that, so that man, like the giants had, would come to worship. And over the generations, the dark was moved a bit further and further into the category of evil. Man abandoned not only his practice of it, but also began to truly believe in his heart that it was what the gods said it was. Eventually, fire replaced dark as the object of man's obsessive worship.
The sun is a wondrous body, like a magnificent father. If only I could be so grossly incandescent.
The gods offered men miracles, and this gift grew into a dependency. And this was how Gwyn subverted mankind, and how fire toppled dark in their value hierarchy. Here's a question. What did the furtive pygmy do in the Dragon War? According to Kath, that knowledge, along with the collective heritage of man, has been suppressed by Gwyn. Also, according to Kath, the shackle of hollowing was placed on mankind as a means of restraining the dark within. And culturally, the dark was suppressed not just with the aforementioned dependency on light, but, just like how the gods pushed their religion, with social pressure. Man and dark are both used in-game as a means to denote greed, whereas the gods and fire always have a positive connotation. Kieran chastises humans for always taking. Devotees of God utter things like, "May fire guide you," and "by the guidance of fire." And throughout the world, the de facto designation is fire equals good, dark equals bad. The stigmatization of the dark doesn't even end with humanity. In the Valley of Drakes, offsprings of the archdragons reside. These lightning-breathing wyverns are the distant spawn of the dragon pups which the gods adopted after the annihilation, and bred to have an affinity for sunlight as a means of defending Orlando, which explains their positioning in the world, and which is also backed up by cut content where these wyverns at one point inhabited Orlando. The ringed city's Midir is an archdragon descendant whom the gods raised to combat the dark. The gods' dominion over the world was at this point so absolute that they even managed to push their bias on the dragons. The world of Dark Souls is a testament to Gwyn's vanity. He drove the enslavement of the giants, the brainwashing of the humans, the slaying of the archdragons, and the worship of fire, and he was meticulous, merciless to his enemies, generous to his allies, going so far as awarding Seath a portion of his own soul for Seath's service in the war. Gwyn's alliances are strategic, and his aims are achieved with long-form manipulation, and he dominates every area of power, effortlessly deploying military force, political tact, and charisma for achieving his aims. And in all he dominates, Gwyn is an immensely interesting figure. To the gods, he's the source of power. To humans, he's perceived as the great benefactor. To the giants, he's the most rewarding master. And through it all, he's the greatest enemy of the world. Sure, he allowed humanity to live, but only because he had made sure they would not grow powerful enough to challenge his empire. And so, human civilization grew, and they separated from one another, developing unique cultures. And this fragmentation is what Gwyn relied on for the first sin. Slowly seducing humanity to abandon their shared culture and destiny as rulers of the Age of Dark, and teaching them to revile it, to think of the dark as a thing to be purged, offering them healing miracles if they just pray to him, offering them bountiful harvests and prosperity, so that over time, the dark went from something which coexisted with the light to being something studied by some, then few, then reviled, and finally, taboo. But the natural law of the world could not be suppressed. However meticulous, however well constructed, a lie
will remain a lie.
As Gwyn's empire aged, so did the flame begin to fade, and the latent destiny of mankind began making itself manifest. Humans became branded by a dark sign, and in death they became undead. And Gwyn knew exactly what this meant. Just as disparity had chosen him as its champion, so soon would a human be chosen to rise up and challenge Gwyn for supremacy, ultimately ushering in the Age of Dark. And as the dragons before him, Gwyn's time was soon to run out. And this was something Gwyn would never abide. But everything in its proper time. Before he could attack the natural law, he had to deal with the dark sign, and he did this by making it into a stigma. The branded were labeled unholy monsters and suffered severe persecution. Whereas before, Gwyn had shepherded the brainwashed humans into worshipping him in spite of the imminent danger they posed, now he was rattled, as is seen in the drastic actions he undertook. Firstly, this is the point in history where Anor Londo was sealed off from the rest of the world, and Sen's fortress was transformed from a military training ground to an outpost which connects the land of the undead to the land of the gods. And this fortress, along with a bricked-up entrance to Anor Londo, has ensured that, according to in-game dialogue, no one has confirmed the route to Anor Londo via Sen's fortress for centuries, leaving the divine capital as a legend. Another drastic measure to combat the onset of undeath was the establishment of the Way of White. While the gods were holed up in Anor Londo, the Way of White would serve as their representatives in the human world, and this is where Gwyn's old tactic came back to bite him. He had allowed, actually relished in, the fragmentation of humanity, as it made it easier for him to ensnare pockets of them at a time and slowly subvert them all away from their shared destiny, but now he needed to shepherd all of them under the umbrella of the Way of White. And as instances occurred of heretics challenging the light's supremacy, it becomes harder and harder to maintain vigilance. So stuck between a rock and a hard place, Gwyn needed to make a move. He could not allow mankind to reunite with their dark heritage, but could also not step out of Anor Londo, so instead, the Way of White was made to spread propaganda and enforce it with violence. Gwyn had previously welcomed man and had never outright banned the practice of the dark, merely discouraged it. The Way of White, however, made this strict orthodoxy. The dark was to be expunged from the minds of men forever. The Dark Ember's item description says, Ember required for weapon ascension. The church long hid this forbidden black ember, and no living blacksmith knows of it. Ascends +5 divine weapons to occult weapons yada yada yada. Occult weapons were used to hunt the gods and are effective against their followers and kin. This ember is hidden away in the painted world because the gods wanted it forgotten. One front of Gwyn's struggle was now sealed. The church was made to hunt the undead. But another front, to ensure mankind's continued reverence for fire and to prevent the onset of hollowing, needed addressing, and so bonfires were created. The bonfires allowed the undead to reverse the effects of hollowing by burning up their excess humanity. This deceptive trick worked, and for a time, man was captive to a perceived dependency on fire. Deep in their hearts, they had been made to truly want fire maintained. Of course, Gwyn didn't just do these things and dust his hands. His characteristically meticulous touch was applied here as well. The holy weapons of the church are said to rival the weapons of the gods in power, after all, so there was care taken with the selection process. Gwyn did not trust humans, so he elevated one of his own to head the church. Specifically, Lloyd was chosen. While the Way of White worked to maintain order among the undead as per Gwyn's will, other actors were making moves. Long ago, Isolith had tried to emulate the First Flame and had spawned chaos pyromancy and birthed within her own society demons. There's much more to it, of course, but to not deviate from the story of Gwyn here, basically, the chaos flame ran amok and tore up Isolith's society for a while. But they managed to get it under control, and in the light of Gwyn's fading era, Isolith pretty much decided to wait him out. Her power was dependent on her flame, so she faced no danger with the end of Gwyn's age. And this did not sit well with Gwyn, who decided to take action. The knights who fought the demons were equipped with new gear. The angelic wing helmets were replaced by demonic horns. The armor texture was altered to assumably defend against new elemental threats. The cape was cut, and the weapons were made much heavier. The Silver Knight's swords were replaced by great halberds, greatswords, and great axes. This was done to reflect a new foe in the demons whose height was tougher than what the Silver Knights would have fought on their day-to-day, and Gwyn was very much a one-sided winner in this conflict, being able to squeeze out conditions which were uniformly beneficial to him. Not long after ending the war with Isolith, Gwyn had to make his move to preserve the Age of Fire, and so he handed power to the gods of Anor Londo and set out for the kiln of the First Flame. Gwyn's item descriptions suggest that he left Anor Londo with only his sword and the clothes on his back. The description for his crown specifically says, Crown of Gwyn, Lord of Cinder, who linked the First Flame. Lord Gwyn, bearer of the ultimate soul, divided that power among his great clan before linking the flame. But he did keep his crown, perhaps to preserve a symbol of the monarch, for its actual power had fully subsided. And there's some cleanup to be done with this text. That the crown's power had fully subsided doesn't mean that it used to be some sort of magical headdress, but rather that the power which it symbolized was no more, i.e., Gwyn wore the crown, but he was no longer a monarch. And that's important because he wasn't deposed. He abdicated the throne to his oldest son. Localization might have you think that Gwyn exiled his firstborn for defying him and allying with the Archdragons, but there is simply no way in which that timeline of events adds up. Remember that line where Koth mentions that Gwyn commanded his children to shepherd the humans before leaving to link the fire? In Japanese, children is sons. Gwyn commanded his sons to shepherd the humans. Additionally, the firstborn would have a more rightful claim to the throne than anyone else, and there's also to consider the Sunlight Blade. This miracle is found by Gwyn's ceremonial casket, and it was left there by his firstborn as a way of honoring his father before going his own way. And that could not have happened until after Gwyn leaves, because the casket would otherwise have no symbolic meaning, if it would have even existed, which I'll grant it maybe would. Regardless, there is a time missing from history of when the firstborn ruled on Orlando. Gwyn did not go to the kiln alone. From the design work interview, Miyazaki. Well, with regards to the Black Knights, the usage has changed, but the concept hasn't. Knights who've continually wandered the world ever since they pursued King Gwyn and were burnt by the fire he linked. Hatsuyama, who designed them. It seems like users are doing well to notice even the concept, where they changed from Silver Knights to Black Knights. There are people saying that this design came out when they were burnt, and I'm like, yes, there are people who are understanding it. This design came out when the Knights were burnt. I know that the Black Knight shield description says, Shield of the Black Knights that wander Lordran, a flowing canal is chiseled deeply into its face. Long ago the Black Knights faced the Chaos Demons and were charred black, but their shields become highly resistant to fire. But that's only in the English version. The Japanese text says, Shield of the Knights of Black who wander Lordran. A flowing ditch is deeply engraved in its surface. The shield of they who once confronted chaos demons is wholly darkened, and has high defense efficacy against fire. The only thing we can gauge from the real item description is that the Black Knights all used to be Silver Knights, and they were all in the war against the demons. This means that Gwyn probably linked the flame very shortly after winning that war, since the knights who followed him, whether they were commanded to or guided by a sense of loyalty, all fought with him. They went with him to the kiln, and in the amazing blaze of Gwyn linking the fire, they were burnt up and their silver armor turned black. They now continue to wander Lordran as ashen heaps, and we can see their after images, as we can other players, once we descend to the kiln. Before leaving, Gwyn made sure his affairs were in order. A stone throw away from Orlando, hidden inside a mountain, is a home for the undead, New Londo. This city was not only known to Gwyn, but he had intimate plans for it. It was a gathering place for humans, and so could have become a threat, but Gwyn made sure it was under his thumb, and the touches displayed here are as meticulous as what we've come to expect from him. To endear himself to the residents, he gave a fragment of his own soul to the leaders of New Londo. That fragment is sliced notably thinner than the fragment he gave to Seath, which indicates trust issues with humans, and the reason he wanted this city to exist was because he had grand ambitions for the destiny of man. Going forwards, they would be the kindle to his eternal age of fire. The Firelink Shrine, actually Firelink Ritual Place, is an extension of New Londo, and New Londo was to produce undead, and the Way of White would allow the gods to control them, and the idea was to shepherd potential replacement kindles for the flame through a system set up to select only the worthy, only the ones Gwyn wanted to reach the kiln, the ones he knew would follow through with linking fire. So the kiln was locked so that only an undead who acquired a powerful soul could enter. And they must have the Lord Vessel with them. That artifact was left in the care of Orlando, and the entrance to the kiln was hidden, with its location being known to Front, a Gwyn loyalist, to further ensure that access would only be given to a true believer. Additionally, Front also served to inspire within prospective kindles a conviction for linking fire. And this was how Gwyn fought the coming of the dark. This is the system of fire linking. And then, having set up the perversion of the natural law, Gwyn went to the kiln of the first flame. and acting out of a dire fear of the dark, a fear which trumped his fear of death, immolated himself to keep fire alive until a worthy challenger, one groomed by a millennia of Gwyn's lies, would come to replace him.
Lord Gwyn trembled at the dark, clinging to his age of fire, and in dire fear of humans, and the Dark Lord who would one day be born amongst them. Lord Gwyn resisted the course of nature by sacrificing himself to link the fire and commanding his children to shepherd the humans. Gwyn has blurred your past to prevent the birth of the Dark Lord.
And that's the Dark Souls lore breakdown. Thanks for watching. For further elaboration on the story of Dark Souls, support the Abyssal Archive and visit Lokey's page. I'll be recording a discussion with him in the coming days where we expand a bit on some of the story of Gwyn I left out here, so stay tuned. I'm certain that there are some details I missed or have gotten wrong, and if you picked up on any of those, I hope you'll contribute that information or theory in the comment section. I'll pin to this video a compilation of theories and corrections, and if you're watching this video sometime after release, you might find some enjoyment in reading it and seeing what the community has added. Videos like this one are made possible by the financial support I receive from Patreon. If you want to support videos like this one being made, consider joining at patreon.com/medievalmegaman. I hope the story of Dark Souls is a bit more clear to you than it was before, and if you enjoyed this video, I hope you'll watch my look back at Dark Souls analysis video where I delve deeper into the game, its inspirations, its narrative implications in the light of what we now know, and all those wonderful mechanics that make it the special gem it is. I'm AesirAesthetics. Thanks for watching.